What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Post Military Podcast. If this is the first time with us, then welcome. This podcast is for people preparing to make a major transition in their life. On this week's episode, we have a former Air Force firefighter, Seth Conn. Seth and I met at Keesler Air Force Base, and Seth had to make his military transition during COVID, which offered some unique challenges he will be talking about. Seth now works as a firefighter for the federal government on Keesler Air Force Base, and he also works as a CrossFit coach at this gym right here, Crooked Letter CrossFit, best gym on the Gulf Coast. If you're ever down there, check it out. In this episode, there's a lot of great advice and information for people struggling to take the next step in their life due to fear or uncertainty. One final note that I want to add is I've added timestamps in the description that allow you to navigate to individual pieces of advice or background on the guest's life. So if there's something specific you're interested in, check that out. If you like the episode, then a like, subscribe, or share, depending on the platform you're on, would be greatly appreciated. Now, let's get into the show.
Solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Post Military Podcast, the podcast where we talk about how to effectively transition from one chapter of your life to another. And today, giving you his story and his advice is Seth Conn. Seth, what's up, man?
How's it going, Billy?
Dude, it's so great to see you. Seth and I have been friends for a really long time. We were stationed at the same base, worked out at the same gym, hung out all the time, and I am super excited to finally have you on so you can get your story out there.
Absolutely. Where do we begin?
Oh, at the beginning, tell everybody about your military career.
Yeah, so I joined the military, the Air Force, when I was 18 years old. It wasn't right out of high school. I waited about a year. I have no idea why. I guess it was just being a little nervous, finally leaving home type of thing. Delayed the process a little bit, but after about a year after graduation, mom was getting pretty sick of me. So she said, get the hell out. So I finally signed those papers in May of 2015. I went to basic training to be a fireman. And it's actually a funny story because my local recruiter was not able to get me that job. So I actually had to go to a different location just so they can hammer me that job, because they called firefighters in the Air Force unicorn jobs. Like, they're really hard to come by. I think it just has everything to do with the manning. So my recruiter laughed right in my face right when I told him I wanted to be a fireman. He pulls out a stack of papers behind him. He's like, check this out. And he pulls out a stack of papers about this high and says, this guy wants to be a fireman too. And I got him the job, but he's been in the DEP program, that little gap before you actually join. He's been in the DEP program for 2 years. And I don't know if that's something that you want to do. And I was like, I don't want to do that, but I also don't want to be anything other than a fireman. So he just started offering me a bunch of other stuff that I was not interested in. And I was like, all right, sir, have a good day. And then I just started thinking, I was like, okay, all right, what else would I want to do? My brother-in-law was in the Coast Guard. So I was like, that'd be pretty cool. I might hop in the water for a little bit, see if I can maybe do some rescue swimming. I'll either take a rescue swimmer position. I was thinking about going into the medical field or just doing something crazy. I just started going to different recruiters, and then I get a phone call from one of my dad's old friends who was actually a first sergeant at a recruiting office in, I think it was Oklahoma. And he calls me up and he says, hey man, I heard you want to be a fireman. I was like, yes, sir. He said, you get a plane ticket out to Oklahoma, I'll get you that job. So 3 weeks later, I was on a plane to Oklahoma, spent about a day and a half there and flew right back. He got me the job. So that was pretty cool.
When you enlist in Oklahoma, then was your state of record going into the military Oklahoma, or how does that work?
I don't know how they did it, but when I arrived at that MEPS, they were all making fun, all these tech sergeants, master sergeants. As soon as I walked through the doors, oh guys, we got Seth Conn here. We got a celebrity in the house, because this guy took me from the back of the line, right? I guess even in the military, it's all about connections.
For sure.
They brought me in. They made fun of me a little bit. I got my first taste of banter in the military right off the bat. And no, but it still said that my MEPS original location was in Los Angeles. So I don't know how they did it, but they kept me there. So I didn't have to fly back to MEPS when I went to basic training. I was still able to go out of LA, which was interesting, but fortunate.
Don't ask questions. Didn't write the rules. You just follow them. Why did you want to be a fireman? Why did you want that so badly?
I've always been like a very physical guy. I love working out. I think you obviously know that. That's how me and you met each other. But I think it was a part of the thing about people saying like, you can't become a fireman. It's too difficult to get into the academy, is too much of a hassle. You have to jump through a lot of hoops. You have to know a lot of people.
Mhm.
And they never talked about joining the military to become one. It's kind of like your easy way in. So once I found that out, it was like a no brainer to me. And at the time, being in high school, school just was not my thing. It is now, but it wasn't then. So at that time, I knew that's not what I wanted to do. So once I found that I could become a fireman through the military and then potentially take those certifications out of the military, that was like I said, it was a no brainer for me.
Okay, so you finally go from LA to basic training. Then what happens next?
So we graduate basic training, and the fire academy for the DOD is in San Angelo, Texas.
Mhm.
Nothing out there except for that little base and the fire academy. So it was pretty dry. I got there in July of 2015, so it was pretty hot. And the academy lasted about 4 months. Once I graduated the academy, I got orders to Germany. So my first duty station was at Ramstein.
That's sweet.
And I
There's worse
never thought,
places you
I'm
could go.
so fortunate. And when I got the orders, I almost didn't want to go because I had no aspirations to go out of the country. Like I literally did not care.
Mhm.
And man, when I got there, my eyes just opened to the entire world. And I quickly realized how fortunate I actually was. I spent 2 years out there, some of the best times of my life. I got to travel the world. I did not save any money. There's no officers in fire protection. So it's just all enlisted. So E2, making $1,100 a paycheck. It was realizing that Paris was a 4-hour drive away and Amsterdam was 4 hours away. And Prague, Czech Republic was 6 hours away. I was like, okay, what are we doing? And the cool thing is, once you're overseas, if you decide you want to stay overseas, it's super easy. It's when you're
Mhm.
stateside that it becomes complicated. So if you ever make the decision to go stateside, like you better be sure about it because coming back overseas is pretty difficult and you have to get pretty lucky for it to happen.
So then you spend all of your time over in Germany. What was the most interesting experience that you think you had in the military while you were overseas?
There's a few things. I think culture was a huge thing, working with German civilians and learning about how their military operates and learning how you really don't know anything about it until you're there. So realizing that Ramstein is one of the biggest bases that transports from Germany to the Middle East or to different locations around the world, just the operations that goes around it, you really don't understand it until you're there and you start to learn things as you're out there. I thought that was really cool. I thought learning my job was really awesome and how like different squadrons work with one another. Like a lot of people think that when they get jobs that they don't appreciate that it doesn't affect the mission at all, but every single job in the military has an impact on how the military operates. Like even when it comes down to, you know, no one wants to work services, right? No one wants to cook food, but every single job serves a purpose. I thought that was pretty interesting to learn. There's a lot of things. There's just so many things that so many positives that came out of it. It was pretty good experience.
Before we talk about where you went next, something that I'm really interested in, I'm sure a lot of other people are interested in. When I think the normal person thinks of a fireman, they think of, oh, there's a building on fire, and then like red truck goes, puts out fire in building. How is Air Force firefighting different, or is it different? What do you do? I guess what does that look like
All
for
right.
everybody out there who's the uneducated folk like myself?
I might get in trouble for this one.
Okay.
So it's
We can cut
almost
it.
the same exact thing. No, it's all good. Let's just keep it rolling. It's almost the exact same thing, but the primary mission of fire protection in the Air Force is for the airfield. So we're airport firefighters before we're anything else. For example, at my first base, Ramstein had 2 runways and it had 5 different hangars with different aircraft on every single hangar, right? So they had C-130s, C-17s, C-5s. They had KC-135s. They had bombers that would come in every now and then. Sometimes they had fighter jets. They had everything. Super busy when it came to the flight line stuff. I was a 19-year-old airman driving a multi-million-dollar, what we call strikers, right? They're aircraft firefighting vehicles. And I'm just going 40 miles an hour, lights and sirens at 19 years old down this massive runway. So that's the number one thing that we are, is we're airport firefighters before we are anything else. Now, some other bases, they don't have flight lines, so they're just on the structural side. So what everybody is used to as far as the engines running actual building fires and structure fires and hazmats and all that stuff. But it is all the same stuff. We do have regular fire engines, even if we have a flight line, because we have a base to tend to. It's not like this base is completely fire protected. There's still buildings, there's still people. We still have to do regular firefighting operations. It's a lot more common when you're domestic. So when you're stateside, that is almost primarily like our job. Like we'll get way more calls on base side, the structural side, and the medical side than we will flight line emergencies.
So primarily you put out airplanes that are on fire, but mostly you're doing the more traditional firefighting that exists that
Correct.
most people. Okay.
So,
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
so if a city firefighter who's never been in the military wants to come onto the federal sector, one, it's hard because if you go on USA Jobs and you try and get a federal position, like a veteran is going to take your spot 10 times out of 10. But even if they so happen not to, you still have to have that ARF, the airport firefighter, a certification to be a federal firefighter. And most city departments won't even give you that they don't provide that certification.
Are there any other kind of specialized fire duties that you can have while you're in the military outside of doing airport firefighting and then structural firefighting?
There's so many certifications that can help you in either direction you go, whether you go city or you go federal. Ropes and rescue, confined space training, hazmat operations, hazmat IC, like the list goes on with fire certifications. Other things that it provides is incident safety officers, health and safety officers. Like, for example, right now I'm in my junior year of getting my occupational health and safety degree. And with all of my certifications from my job as a fireman, I basically walked into my junior year. Like I had so many credit that transferred directly to my degree.
Mhm.
And it was basically a no-brainer. On top of that, they're going to pay for my school and pay me to go to school.
So, going back to your historical timeline, so you wrap up in Germany, and then where do you go next?
So Keeler Air Force Base, and a kid being from California, when I
You're
hear
like,
that
what's in Mississippi?
like, Mississippi, what? No. Where am I going? I didn't even know Mississippi had a beach. I had no idea.
Neither did I when I found out I was going there.
It's not the best beach in the world, but there's a beach. Before I went out there, I watched Last Chance U on Netflix, and their first season is in Scuba, Mississippi. And their main point of that show is to show how terrible Scuba, Mississippi is. So I thought I was heading to Scuba, Mississippi, which was not exciting at all. But I hear you're going to always meet someone, you're going to work with someone in the military, no matter what, that's been like, no, I've been through Keesler Air Force Base, or I've been through these bases and it's actually not that bad. And almost every single time you'll get some insight on where you're headed before you get there. Got here in December of 2017. I think anytime you PCS, I don't want to say it's like a depression period, but it is a period, it could be a pretty difficult transitional period for people getting used to the area that they know nothing about. So I think that's how I was at first. I didn't know the area. I didn't know all the good locations. The only roads I went on were like right outside of the base, and most of them are pretty run down. And I was just like, okay, maybe this place isn't so great. But I think getting through those first couple of months and finding your niche in the area is like something to be aware of before you PCS and when you PCS, because that can help you out a lot.
So, what was your time like during Keesler? Because you were there for a decent bit of time.
Yeah. So active duty, I was there 2.5 years before I got out.
Mhm.
I think so. I think it was around that time. And it went from not so great to amazing in the matter of 30 days. once I found out what I like to do around here, like it changed for me so fast because you can be stationed at, you know, Minot or Cannon, right? Those are like, those are notorious for the two worst bases in the Air Force. But if you're with a great group of people and you find things that you like to do, then it doesn't matter. You're going to have a good time. And this place isn't bad at all, but I also found a group of people that didn't have anything to do with Keesler Air Force Base, and they trapped me. They made me want to stay here forever. And I see that a lot in my fire department with new airmen that come in that just don't want to be here. And I just tell them all the time, if Keesler Fire Department is the only thing that you have in Mississippi, then maybe you won't like it. But if you find something that you enjoy, that you can detach from, like, it can make your time here like very well worth it. And that's exactly what happened to me.
You can never understate the importance of a community that is your own. I think that establishing that is so crucial. And my wife and I, when we moved away from Mississippi, we really felt the loss of the community that we had in Mississippi for those first couple of months. And only recently have we been able to find a place where we fit again. It wasn't at a CrossFit gym, but it's at a church. And so we have this really cool small group that we hang out with, and they're functioning as that out of military community that I think is so incredibly important that you've already highlighted. So I think that's an amazing call out. And now that you have had to find that community and you're mentoring airmen that are coming into your fire department, what would be your advice for finding that community? So for people who are in the military and they're PCSing, or for people who are out of the military and are moving to a new area, do you have any general advice that you would want to give those listeners for how they can try and find community?
Do your research and ask around. Have a plan. That is literally one of the main things that the military teaches you, is to think ahead and have a plan. Find out what you're into, whether it's working out, CrossFit, jujitsu, Muay Thai, golfing, whatever it is that you like to do, go find out what that is and go find those communities before you even arrive. And if you don't like that community, go to another one. But I guarantee you there's probably going to be something that you will find that you're going to enjoy when you get there. But I think you're doing yourself a disservice when you just focus on PCSing and you're doing your out processing checklist and you get overwhelmed and you're not even thinking about what you're going to do when you get there. I think that people can get caught up in that kind of stuff. So just do your research and start thinking about what's going to make you happy no matter what. If your next squadron isn't everything that you hoped it would be, just be prepared for every avenue. I think that's probably the number one thing I would say.
I really like what you just said, which is people can get really caught up in the rush of moving to a new base, or the rush of getting out of the service, where you just have your head down and then you get there and then you look up and you're like, I don't even know where I ended up, because you never had the time to plan. When you were deciding to get out of the military when you were at Keesler, do you think you did a good job of planning for your transition, or do you think that the advice you're giving now is something that you have learned through examination of your own actions? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think it's a little bit of both. When I was transitioning out of the military, it was especially a scary time because it was right when COVID hit. I actually tried to extend my contract just for the simple fact that people were getting laid off and people weren't making any money. I was planning on getting out of the military in May of 2020, and COVID hit in March. I start my transition and everybody's losing their jobs. Like, nobody's working at this point. So I'm like, okay, what the hell am I going to do? I have nothing that I can, like, the whole world is shutting down. What am I going to do? I know for a fact that if I stay in the military, I'm going to continue to get a paycheck. So I guess initially that is what I tried to do. I tried to extend my contract, but I had already extended it. So they have a funny way of trying to keep you in the military or get you to get out. So you have, I think that I know this is for the Air Force. I'm not sure if it's for every branch. You can extend up to 1 year just because you want to. They'll allow you to do it for 1 year if you want to. Anything after that has to be in the best interest of the Air Force. So I already extended my year. I had already extended a year. So when I tried to do it again, they wouldn't let me. So now I had no choice but to get out. But I was going to do it, and I did. When I joined the military, I knew that I wanted to get out. So that's why I came back stateside, is because if I stayed overseas, then I would want to stay in. So I purposefully got myself back stateside so I would want to get out. And I was scared. It was a very scary period, and I wasn't 100% sure of what I was going to do. So I literally got a paper and notepad and a pen, and I just wrote down a million different things, a million different options: plan A, plan B, plan C. With a budget, I did everything that I possibly could to prepare myself. One of the things that I was going to do is just start training people from my mom's garage. Like I just said, all right, I'm going to buy $10,000 worth of gym equipment. I'm going to clear out my mom's garage, and I'm going to start personal training people until I can get my own apartment. And if my mom won't let me move in with her, which I don't want to live with her anyway, then I'll find a couple of friends that need an apartment or something, and I'll just figure something out. And I created my budget. I created different avenues of income, and I just said, one of these is going to work, and I'm not going to back out just because I'm so worried about stability. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I think that's the number one thing that keeps people in.
I agree with you. I think that people look at the transition and there's so many facets to separating yourself from the military that as you dig into it, you just realize that it's just bigger and bigger than you think it is. And people just don't even want to engage with that size of a problem. And so, something that I'm really interested in, how old were you when you were preparing for your transition?
I was 24.
24. Sitting down and game planning to the level that you did as a 24-year-old, I would say what is a highly mature response. I think a lot of 24-year-olds, when they bail out of the military, they don't do that. And so, something you've already said, you wanted to be a fireman because of the challenge of being a fireman. You said that when you were getting out, you you were not going to back down. So you were like, I need to find a way forward because I refuse to back down. So you have this drive, this internal drive, and I've seen you work out. I know that also exists in the physical aspects of your life as well. How do you cultivate that so that when these moments of adversity come up, you're able to push through regardless of the fear associated with it?
I think it's just a willingness, a willingness to fail in order to succeed,
Hmm.
to be able to not panic when things aren't necessarily going your way, and
Mhm.
to self-reflect and being like, okay, how am I going to make this work?
Mhm.
I think you're just going to find a way to do it. You got to just understand that something is going to work out, and attack whatever it is that you think you can. So
Mhm.
whether it was me training people from home, whether it was me using the GI Bill full time to go to school,
Mhm.
right? There's income right there. There's The military provides a lot of benefits that you can actually use to transition. You got
Mhm.
VA business loans. You have all of these things that you can use as like your plan A's and your plan B's. So
Mhm.
I guess just fear is always going to be there, especially when you try something new. But I think that when you live in this heightened level of comfortability, I think that's probably even more dangerous.
So then, how can somebody build up their tolerance to being uncomfortable? Because I think what you're saying is correct, but I also don't think everybody not everybody exists with the level of pain tolerance or fear tolerance that you have. And so, how do you think someone could start building themselves up to get to that point, in your opinion?
Do things that are hard, do things that are challenging, read books that you don't want to read that have valuable pieces of information in them.
Mhm.
go do a workout that you really don't feel like doing that was going to be very difficult. One of the things that I recently picked up, and I know this isn't financially related, but it is when you're talking about the stoicism aspect of it, and that's training jujitsu. I get choked nearly unconscious every single time I walk in there. Is that comfortable to me? No, not at all. But I know that I'm getting something out of it. And you can use that mentality for literally anything, learning a new skill. I think once you've done your upgrade training in the military and you've gotten in this operational mode where you find pockets of time to do things, maybe that's something to think about if you're ever considering getting out of the military, maybe adapting to a new skill that might make you lose an hour or two of sleep at night. It might make you a little bit more busy, and people naturally don't want to do that kind of stuff. They just want a hard day at work. They want to go hit the Chick-fil-A line and go straight to sleep. But if you ever want to get out of the military and you don't necessarily know if you can use your AFSC, your job title after you transition, maybe start thinking of things that you want to do. And that might require a little bit of sacrifice while you're still in, but doing those things and creating that hustle mentality, even if it's at the micro level at first, just building those steps of discipline in the process that's going to help you when you finally get out.
Yeah. One thing you just said there that I really love is the micro steps. I think that the thing that people think is, oh, Seth just flipped a switch one day and all of a sudden he went from this regular dude to somebody who is just able to gut it out. And I think that when somebody looks at it from that angle, things like that sound impossible. But in reality, most people who have learned a skill or have built up that mentality are doing it through incremental change over a long period of time. And you're just seeing someone like yourself, you're just seeing the end result of years of gutting it out through a variety of means. And you're just seeing an end product or a product that's much further down the line than you versus someone who just went from something to something else in a day, which I think is a very important distinction to make.
Yeah, and it is. And again, not every transition is going to be the same. People are going to have a lot more challenges that they face just depending on their current situation in life. Do they have kids? Are they single? There's so many things that varies that other people are going to have to worry about. And I
Yeah.
think that is obviously something to consider big time. It was when I was getting out, it was just me. So I'm not discrediting the 30-year-old man that has two kids and the military life is becoming difficult to manage in that marriage and with those kids and they want to get out, but they're just
Mhm.
staying in because they have two kids to take care of. So
Mhm.
I think when it comes to people like that, it is to take those micro steps over a longer period of time to get ready for that transition. If that's what you and your family truly want to do, then maybe it shouldn't be done overnight. But on the flip side, people like Chad, who's the owner of this gym at a Crooked Letter CrossFit, he was in the Marine Corps active duty for 10 years and he had two kids and one on the way. I don't know if his son was born yet, but it was right around that same time period. And he had a burning desire to open a gym. And he said, screw it. And I don't know how many times you've heard this. You're 10 years in. Why don't you just do 10 more and get your retirement? But that isn't what he wanted to do. He didn't want to sit there for 10 more years. So he took that risk and it was a big one. He was already an E6. I think that's a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps. I believe so.
Comment down below if you're a Marine and we're wrong. So,
I think so. I'm just an
yeah,
Air Force
yeah,
kid. So
yeah, exactly. I'm just a dumb cyber guy. I don't know nothing.
you guys can make fun of us in the comments too. But yeah, they're scary steps. There has to be some level of courage there if you
Sure.
want to do what you want to do. Because if you want to do something, but you're too afraid to take the steps, then it's just never going to happen.
Yeah. I think that on one hand, there is certainly a benefit to making those micro changes over time and making that plan really far out. But there's also benefit to almost burning the ships and saying, this is what it is now. Because you might have a different experience. I almost feel like for a lot of people, the panic of having no other way out is like the most powerful forcing function to get people to change. I don't think there's a better version of that in the world, because I think it's just way rarer to have the mental fortitude to do what you're doing versus someone who's like, well, I have no choice. So I've got to adjust now. So for you, you said that you came back to the States to Keesler because you knew you were going to get out once your contract was up.
Just like you said, I didn't give myself the option. I said, I'm going to get out of the military. I'm not going to stay overseas. While all my friends went to Misawa and they went to Italy and they went to all of these locations, I said, I'm going to Mississippi because I'm going to get out.
When you were doing the, like, writing down all of your options, you were aware of the business loans, you were aware of your different education benefits. When did you start accumulating that body of knowledge? And when did you really start mentally preparing for your transition once you made the decision that you were coming back to the States?
I didn't really know too much about it while I was at Ramstein.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, my first 2 years in the military was all upgrade training and just learning about the Air Force. So it wasn't so much about learning about the transition when you get out. I think in a way, the military, unless you are telling your superiors that you are going to get out, you'll hear it from people, here and there, but you're not going to hear about a whole bunch of these benefits from people who are supposed to give them to you until you tell them you're getting out. So the first couple of years was just me learning my job. It wasn't until I got Keesler that I really started learning some things.
Gotcha. Right when you got to Keesler, you started looking into the various options that were available to you for your transition.
Right. You start learning about the Montgomery versus the post 9/11 GI Bill. You start learning about if you get injured on the job. I had a very physically demanding job in the military. I hurt my back, I hurt my shoulder. So that you start learning a little bit about the VA. You start learning about VA loans. You start learning about business loans and just all kinds of stuff. And once you have a real knowledge on that stuff, there is a bit more protection there just right away.
Yeah, because you actually know what options are available to you versus this being this complete unknown that exists. For someone who's listening to this who has not yet decided to transition out of the military, how long do you think someone should take to prepare for their transition?
If you're twiddling your thumbs on the idea, then I don't know if it's going to vary person to person, but if you just know if you want to get out, you might try and convince yourself if you want to stay in, and I've seen that happen a million times.
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that's a bad option, but if you decide that you are going to get out, I think you need to at least give yourself at least a 6-month window to prepare. So if you know that you're going to use your job skills in the military right when you get out, then you have a little bit more wiggle room, right? You have your resume, you have your DD 214, you
Mhm.
have all of these things that you know is probably going to get you something out the door.
Mhm.
But if you work in munitions and you don't really have much to go by once you get out, you don't have, if you want to go work in IT or go work in the fire department or go do things you want to do that has nothing to do with munitions, then you need to give yourself a little bit more time.
I know you said you were considering starting a gym, like doing training out of your mom's garage. Did you ever consider doing any other kind of work outside of firefighting when you left the service?
The gym, I think that was the number one thing, but
Mhm.
and I'm completely happy where I'm at and I love working for Chad, but I've always told myself if I ever did leave Mississippi, like
Mhm.
that's what I would probably do. I love firefighting,
Mhm.
but I would do what I really love to do. And I'm doing it now and I'm doing it for someone that I love to work for. He's one of my best friends.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to open any type of gym anywhere near here. But if I ever did leave, that's probably what I would do. Like I said, it goes back to using those business loans and that the military does provide to get you started. And it also comes with, I'll butcher this trying to really explain how it works, but I'm pretty sure that those VA business loans do provide like a security net if something does not work out. It's not like you're just going to go bankrupt and lose all your money. I could be wrong. Again, people want to comment down below, but I'm pretty sure that they have you covered.
That's an area of the military transition that I never really explored in terms of starting my own business. So for you, would you say that the unknown in terms of COVID was probably the most difficult part of your transition?
By far.
Yeah. And how did you manage that stress from I know you were talking about having a plan, going down, writing out options, but more so managing the emotion. How did you find success in doing that?
It was hard. It's hard to explain, but I guess I don't know. I guess it was just something deep down was telling me that I was going to be okay no matter what. I just knew that I was going to find something to get me by until things got better. I guess I felt like I would regret because I personally wanted to get out. I felt like I might regret backing out and signing another 4-year contract. So I think that me sticking to my guns was a better alternative than backing down. And I'm not saying that staying in is a bad thing. It's not. The Air Force has provided me with the life I live today. It literally has done everything for me up until this point. It has been great for me. It was the best thing I ever did. But I guess just talking to people, don't bottle things in, get advice from people who have gotten out. I think that someone who's been out for a while is going to be able to tell you a few things that you just don't know at that time. And just seeing it from their perspective. And once you realize that there are options and that you will figure something out as long as you're willing, then it's going to be okay.
Did you reach out to different people to get advice in terms of people who've transitioned out?
Oh, yeah. I'm not the guy to keep quiet. I will bug people with questions all day long.
What was the best piece of advice that you got from somebody in terms of
Take
going into
advantage
the
of your
military?
benefits, go to school. People are willing to hire veterans more than they are other people.
Mhm.
Don't be afraid of not being in the exact position you want when you separate, because that's pretty rare.
Mhm.
It's not like everything's just going to fall into your lap as soon as you get out. I think there is going to be a transitional period that might be a struggle, but struggles are what they create the results you want. So I think just be willing to do it and be willing to work through the challenges in that transitional period instead of backing out just because, you are worried is probably the biggest piece of advice I would get.
I think that grappling with that, the unknown, is just something that everyone has to do for the rest of their life once they get out of the military. And learning how to deal with it now is incredibly important for sure. So, when you did finally get out, what was it like for you becoming kind of your own man after going straight from high school to really having all of your adult experiences up until that point being part of the military? What was that like for you?
The transition was, I'd say, the constant like measuring, having feeling like someone's breathing down your neck. That was a little bit to get used to. Like I still for a while had this like kind of hard military bearing about me for a little while after. Just knowing that you have this free will is,
Weird.
yeah, it's pretty revolutionary. It's pretty exciting, I'm not gonna lie. And that's also the cool part about it is the world is yours as soon as you get out. It's like you get to choose what you want to do, where you want to go, how you want to do it. I think that once I realized that like I could do whatever I want was probably the biggest eye-opening thing. But transitioning, I think I was starting to get used to it. It only took me a few months to really figure things out.
First, it's amazing that you were able to feel like you've fallen into a really awesome spot right now. What do you think are the factors that you had in your life that helped contribute to that success so quickly?
I think being around the right people, I think being around people that were motivated and that kind of had like-minded interests and that weren't bringing me down. People who were also willing to take chances, not listening to negative people. You hear that a lot in the military too, is like, why? When you consider getting out of the military, how many times are you going to hear the word why? I guess not feeding into things that your heart is telling you and someone is telling you something else. Is try not to listen to that voice. Try and listen to what it is that you want to do and surround yourself with those people. I think just that played a huge factor into my decisions that led me to this point. I grew up in a house full of women. Like my dad was around, but I lived with my mom and my two sisters.
Mhm.
And like I didn't have this crazy work ethic. I was very into sports. I was very athletic, did my thing, but I didn't have true discipline. I didn't have this crazy grit about me. It was more so developed as soon as I got in and throughout. It was kind of like, I'm not discrediting my dad. I love this guy, but it was like the dad that was there in my early adulthood. It's just like I developed like these certain disciplines that helped me get out and it gave me the confidence to get out, which is ironic because Air Force just wants to keep you in, but it gave me an even higher confidence to get out of the military. It gave me this set of skills that I thank them for, but I'm going to take them and leave. Bye.
You knew exactly what you wanted from military service. And I do not think that's a bad thing at all. I think that going in with a purpose, saying I've satisfied that purpose, and then leaving allows you to view the military as a chapter in the book versus the book itself. And I think too many people use the military. It's not too many people. This is going to sound bad. I think that people use the military as the primary source of purpose in their life a lot. And that's not necessarily bad. And there's certainly less noble things that you could ground your identity in. But the problem is the military ends at some point. And if you have grounded your identity in the military, then when you leave, then it's over. And your identity is, who am I now? I think for you, you always looked at the military as you had it placed in a very specific spot in your mind, and that allowed you to say, I got what I came here to do, and now I'm gonna go do something else. And I think that allowed you to just decouple a little bit better than others while still having reverence for what it was. Like you're not someone who's the military sucks. You're like, this is great, but it's now over, and I'm cool with that.
I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast are probably active duty and they are considering getting out of the military. And it goes back to what we were talking about before, right? So I had a plan before I joined, and I joined firefighting so I can do my 5 years and go be a firefighter when I got out. Now, if you join the military and you just picked a job that the recruiter gave you, okay, not the best scenario in the world, but you're still going to reap all these benefits. And it goes back to what we were saying about learning a discipline at the micro level, finding out what you want to do, and then slowly chipping away at it, giving yourself enough time before you get out to get those things set up. All right. So for me, it was easy in terms of going from one job to the next, even though there might be a transition period. I might have to stack my money for a while. I might have to use the GI Bill as that supplemental income, right? So I have all these things that I did during my transition period of getting out, and those things help me. But if you are in a job that you don't want to do when you get out, just do those things first, right? Okay, all right, I'm going to get out. My contract is one more year. I don't want to be a cop anymore. I want to get into real estate. Okay, we'll go buy 20 books on real estate then and read them. If you want to go be a welder. Okay, all right. So where can I go take a night class? Just those things are going to help you a lot. I guess most of the advice that I've given on this podcast has been just devise some sort of plan, just something. And what you said about having only one option, that is probably the most powerful tool you can have. Any successful businessman or entrepreneur will say there is no plan B. Like there's one plan and I'm going to make this plan work. I think just learning to develop some sort of mindset in that category is going to help you out a lot. And it's probably going to work out.
If you care about something enough, you will find a means by which to make it happen. It might not look like what you thought it was going to look like, but you will find some way to make that thing work out. And you just have to have the grit to push through that. So something that I thought that you said earlier that I wanted to dig into, and it goes back to this idea of grounding your identity in a value set. I believe that everyone has to ground their identity in something. And what you decide to ground your identity in really does affect your outlook, what you decide to prioritize in your life, and also whatever you choose to emphasize really affects your emotional stability. So if you pick something that is out of your control, you're going to rise and fall with that as life happens. You mentioned stoicism earlier. And so I'm curious, how do you make the determination on what to ground your identity?
Just figure out what your values are and don't let anything sway you from those. I think learning about what it is that you want to do and not letting anything distract you from that, whether it's I want to open a business one day or I want to do this one skill. It's you wanting it bad enough and you developing the mindset of determination. That's what I want to do. And don't let anybody convince you otherwise. It's just, I don't want to say it's so hard to get. The worst advice to give is to just be like, just do it, man. Just grow a pair. That doesn't happen overnight. And I wasn't that guy overnight. I wasn't that guy I wasn't always just this go-getter type figure. I think you almost have to get backed into a corner to be like, this isn't what I want. And I got to do something to change it. And I think that once you get backed in that corner and you make that realization, I think your decisions become a lot more clear. I think you can develop that mindset and those habits and stuff like that and that confidence to go for the things you actually want to go for.
What do you think are values in life that are worth grounding your identity in?
My specific values in life.
Either what are you doing or just in general, what do you think are things worthy of holding that major place in who you are as a person? For example, if I had to tell you what mine are, I would probably say it would be fitness, my religion, and then my family. Those are the three things that I'm willing to stake most of my life on. And two of those things are very constant and very stable. The fitness one I've struggled with ever since my medical event that got me out of the military, but I still think it's incredibly important. And I'm willing to still ride the peaks and valleys of that because I deem it to be so incredibly important. So but that's what I would say. So I'm curious what
Okay.
you think.
Got it.
Like,
I want to,
what
I
are
do want,
things that
you
are,
know,
yeah.
I do want to mention that even though you had what you had happen to you,
Mhm.
you still didn't change that was one of your highest values. And I
Yeah.
think that goes back to mindset.
Mhm.
You had something happen that most people would just go throw their hands up and go, all right, that one's done. And you didn't. That just didn't happen. And I think it just goes back to my answer, which is your purpose. What is your purpose? What are the things that you know, whether you're a religious person or you have a certain set of beliefs that you know that you need to be doing. And I think if a man or a woman, if you're doing anything that is like not a part of your purpose, I think that's when your values are just going to crumble. So mine obviously are with fitness, staying healthy, because when you have a healthy body, you have a healthy mind. Just being a good person, being good to others at all times, no matter what. I think people do a lot of bad things, not even necessarily like deliberately, but when people just don't care about you and when people aren't willing to give a helping hand, that can really be destructive to certain people. So I think that when you do that, it's going to return in your own favor one day. So I just think being a good person, and a lot of that has to do with my religion, it has to do with just doing right by God. That has a lot to do with it. And just being a servant to the world and doing what I trying to do the good thing every single day. Those are just my values. I don't need to be a millionaire, although I would like to be, but I don't need a Lamborghini and a house in Barbados to feel like those are the values I want fulfilled. It's just those things.
I will say that a lack of those defined values will not be fulfilled by money. Money
Right.
can enhance your life provided you have though that foundational set of values and beliefs that you have. If you have those and you have money, that's great, but you cannot replace building that foundation by just being rich. One thing that I think is really cool that you're talking about, like being a good person, showing people that you care, really leaning into that. Something that you do that I really love is that you're a coach at a gym. And I think that is really allowing you to give in a way that you are there to help others. But have you, what advice would you give people to build their once they're out of the military, to build their life holistically? Like, I think it's really cool. Like, a major part of your life has nothing to do with your job, which is being a firefighter. And I
Right.
think a lot of people, and this isn't just for people getting out of the military, I think a lot of people, like, their job is like the core of who they are. How did you avoid that, and how would you encourage others to follow in your footsteps?
So, I mean, there's kind of two categories of people. There's the people who live to work and then work to live. I love firefighting. It's a little bit slower than city departments, but overall, I'm helping people on their worst day. And to me, that's pretty fulfilling. But man, I love coaching. And that's the reason I'm still in Mississippi, is because I love to help people who have been sitting on the couch for 2 years and that finally say that they are willing to make a change,
Mhm.
and they come to me to do that. And I think that's the coolest thing
Yes.
in the world. And I think that it's not just about looking good. It's when you see them get in better shape or work to get in better shape, everything about their lives starts to change positively.
Mm.
And I think that's a really cool part. I think that's probably the best part about what I do now for other people. I think the number one way to being happy is to find things to help people, things that can benefit other people's lives. I think going back to what I said about being a servant to other people, great. And it could be in a million different directions, right? I want to restore old furniture. Okay. That's what I want to do when I get out as a side hustle. And that has nothing to do with my main job in the office. I want to get this piece of crap dresser that I found on Facebook Marketplace for $17. I'm going to put a little bit of effort into it. I'm going to sell it for $100 to someone
Yeah.
who really wants it and be like, here you go. Boom. I just made
Yeah.
that person's day. I got a little bit of money. And then you can turn those things into a really cool, like fulfilling like a hobby and a source of income. I think just figuring out what it is you like to do. I think just do what you want to do and make enough time for it. If your job isn't your number one thing, or if it's
Mhm.
just a big part of your life, but not your whole life, there's a million different things, and find what that thing is. Just go find it, go do it. And maybe one day that can be your full-time job.
Do you think that you will ever get to a point where you're going to make coaching your full-time job?
Oh, absolutely. I think that when the time is right, when it makes sense financially, whether that means I'm saving money or a bigger opportunity happens, I think that I could totally see myself doing that, because I love firefighting, but when I have a family, I don't know if I'm going to want to stay there for 48 hours at a time. I think that I'm going to want to see my kids every single day and my wife. And that's why I got my job, and then I'm doing something else that I love, and I have my options now.
It's an interesting question. I'm in a very interesting boat where I really love doing the podcast, but I still need to work to make money because unfortunately I'm not a world famous podcaster yet. And so,
You'll get the Joe Rogan spot one day,
I
or
mean,
you'll get.
that'd be cool. That'd be cool.
Okay.
I'd like that. Until then, like, I'm doing the cybersecurity stuff, and it's cool, but it's definitely an internal battle for me. On, man, I would rather just be doing this. And so it's something I'm still working through in terms of how do I balance that, and how do I keep the motivation to do my job, which is paying the bills, while also pursuing something that I love, which is this.
Just keep on doing it because there's a lot of valuable. I've been listening to your podcast and you've had guys on that provide so much good information, like very smart individuals willing to have conversations and you asking good questions. And that's just the way it goes. Keep doing it.
Yeah, you're right. It's definitely not something I'm going to stop anytime soon. And lots of cool vets just like yourself with cool stories. I really enjoy talking to people about it and glad that it's providing benefit to people out there, I hope. Last question before we roll off. What is your final piece of advice you want to leave the listeners with before we go?
A two-parter. One
Okay.
we've already covered. One that I want to tell listeners to be looking out for, or maybe use this platform to try and change the trajectory of how the military currently does it. So for those that are still in, it's not necessarily about leaving the military, but it's just something that I want to raise a little bit more awareness to. And that is, if you are still in the military and you are around people who are suffering from any type of mental health issues, I think that is a huge deficiency in the United States military right now, especially in my line of work. I've seen some bad stuff, and there is like a way out of all that stuff. And I think that an annual suicide awareness, mental health awareness briefing, or even a monthly one that has to do with a slideshow, I don't think that is doing anything. I honestly think it probably makes it worse. Finding avenues to communicate to people, actually genuinely showing people that you care and that you're trying to help them. And if you're an NCO or a senior NCO, or if you're a commander and you're listening to this, I know that we are in the military and we have a job to do at the end of the day. And sometimes that could be super stressful, but you have to look in the mirror and say, is this out of this group of 100 people that I'm making them do this at this time that might not be necessary? Like, how many of them is that going to affect mentally in a worse way? So I think that everybody in the military, supervisors or not, have a better eye out for this stuff. And if you know of anybody or yourself is having issues, like, seriously talk about it, because there's going to be people that are going to be there to help you. The second thing is just find a way to have find something that's going to give you the drive to do what you really want to do. Find out what it is. And even if it's not, you don't 100% have a plan, but you know that in your heart that you don't want to stay in the military, man, just do it. If you want to stay in, but I promise you, if you're a level-headed person and you have any type of drive in you, I think the benefits of the military and the certifications that you've gotten and the knowledge that you've gotten is going to get you at least in the right direction. It might not be immediate, but I promise you it'll happen.
I think the call out for mental health is incredibly important. I think that for people who are going through the military and for people who are getting out of the military, the number one assumption that people make is that they're the only person who feels the way that they feel. And that's just not the case. Everybody's going through something, and make sure you're not suffering in silence, and find a community, find people to help you and support you through that. Don't just go off into the darkness by yourself, because it's a bad time. And I think that it's amazing advice for those in leadership to be come up with real solutions to deal with that, and not just do a monthly briefing, because there's nothing that makes me want to kill myself more than PowerPoint.
Exactly. I think you just, like, we both just said it. It's like, it's a lot of weight to carry, but it is the position and the people in the positions of power that are going to have to make those adjustments. It is up to the individual who's going through it to seek help, but it's also, if a supervisor or a commander, or
If they're not making a good space for it, no one's going to come to for help.
if you don't make a good space for it, if you are making airmen, Marines, soldiers, whatever, do things that they don't necessarily need to be doing,
Mhm.
then try and figure out different tactics to get the mission essential things done and alleviate some of the unwanted stressors that the military goes through on a daily basis.
It's very much so a culture thing. Officers get paid more and senior NCOs and NCOs get paid more because the expectation for them to make decisions outside of their singular scope of influence that's the expectation. So you get paid the big bucks because you're supposed to be taking care of people. And I think that's an amazing point and something that everyone should be thinking about, whether they are in a leadership position in the military or if they're in a leadership position outside of the military. It's your responsibility to do that whenever you can. So,
Correct.
yeah. Seth, dude, it's been so great talking to you. It's been awesome
Yeah,
catching
man.
up.
Thank you for
Thanks
having me
so
on. I'm sorry for at the time you originally texted me, I was extremely busy with a million different things. Won't
It's
get
all good,
into them,
man.
but I'm glad that you were able
I'm
to get me on.
I'm happy that you took the time. Anybody who's willing to come on and spend an hour and 10 minutes talking about themselves and giving advice to people about how they can better tackle the challenges that life throws at them, like, they're great people. And you definitely did not have to take the time, but you chose to, and I'm very grateful for that. And so, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dude.
Yeah. And for everyone else out there, if you like the content, please subscribe. We'd love the support and we would love for you to follow us on this journey. And we will see you on the next episode of the Post Military Podcast. Peace, everybody.